The first time Amanda saw Maxwell, it was during a heavy downpour at Oil Mill Market in Port Harcourt. She had been running toward her parked car when a reckless Danfo splashed muddy water all over her cream-colored gown. Angry and frustrated, she had turned to confront the driver, but before she could say a word, a deep, calming voice beside her said, "Let me help you." She turned and found herself staring at a tall, dark-skinned man in a neatly pressed shirt, holding out his handkerchief. Their eyes met, and for a moment, everything else seemed to fade. "Thank you very much," she had said, chuckling nervously. "It's my pleasure," he replied with a lopsided smile. They spoke for a few minutes, light, effortless conversation. She learned that he was a marine engineer, often working offshore. He spoke with a calm confidence, a quiet strength in his presence. She enjoyed the conversation, but when she left, she realized something. Neither of them had asked for the other's contact. That night, Amanda lay on her bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying their conversation. Why didn't I ask for his number? She groaned internally. He hadn't asked for hers either, which meant that was probably the last she would ever see of him. 3 weeks later, Amanda was setting a tray of grilled fish and plantain on a customer's table at the waterfront restaurant where she worked part-time. The sea breeze carried the sound of laughter, the rhythmic lapping of waves creating a soothing backdrop. As she turned to attend to another table, her breath caught in her throat. It was him. Seated at a corner table, looking over the water with a relaxed expression, was the same man from the Oil Mill Market. He hadn't noticed her yet. She took a deep breath, steadied herself, and walked over. "Hello, stranger. How may I help you?" she asked lightly. He turned sharply, eyes widening in surprise before a slow smile spread across his lips. "Well, this is unexpected," he said. "You work here?" "Part-time. Mostly weekends. But I run my own catering business." He nodded, glancing at the tray in her hand. "That explains the confidence with food." Amanda chuckled, placing the order for the customer before turning back to him. "I almost didn't recognize you." "I definitely recognize you," he said, leaning back in his chair. "I was actually thinking about that day at the Oil Mill Market." She folded her arms, raising a brow. "Really?" "Yeah." He exhaled, looking amused. "I realized later that we never exchanged numbers. By the time I figured that out, it was too late." Amanda smiled, relieved that she wasn't the only one who regretted it. "So, fate decided to fix that for us?" "Looks like it." She hesitated, then asked, "What are you doing in Port Harcourt now?" "I thought you worked offshore." "I do," he said, gesturing at his half-empty glass of juice. "But I just got back a few days ago. Usually, I'm out for about 4 weeks at a time, then home for 2. "That must be tough," she said, genuinely curious. "It has its moments," he admitted. "You miss a lot, family events, celebrations. But it has its rewards too. Being out at sea gives you a lot of time to think." She nodded thoughtfully. "I can imagine. How about you?" he asked. "How's business?" "Growing," she said with a hint of pride. "I'm hoping to open a full restaurant soon. But for now, I cater events and work here for the extra experience." "I admire that," he said sincerely. "A lot of people just dream, but you're actually putting in the work." She felt a warmth spread through her. There was something refreshing about his presence, grounded, steady. "Well, since fate decided to give us another chance," she said playfully, "I won't make the same mistake twice. My name is Amanda, and I would love to keep in touch this time." He chuckled, reaching into his pocket for his phone. "I'm Maxwell, and I'd say fate knows what it's doing." They exchanged numbers, and as Amanda returned to her shift, she found herself smiling. She didn't know where this would lead, but something about Maxwell felt different. Strong, familiar, yet unexplored, and she was willing to find out. Amanda wasn't sure when exactly things changed. Maybe it was the late-night calls when Maxwell was offshore, his deep voice washing over her like the ocean waves he worked on, or the way he looked at her, like she was something precious. Maybe it was the night she stayed over at his place for the first time, curled up on his couch as they talked for hours. However it happened, it was undeniable now. She was completely in love with him. Whenever he was in town, they were inseparable. They explored Port Harcourt together. Long drives to Bonny Island when he wanted to be near the sea, lazy afternoons at the mall, evenings spent on the waterfront where they first reconnected. And then there were the nights. At first, she had been hesitant to sleep over at his place, but Maxwell had a way of making her feel safe. His apartment, a spacious and modern space in GRA, reflected his personality, minimalist yet thoughtful. He never pressured her for anything, but over time, it became natural for her to stay the night. Most nights, they would cook together, laughing as he fumbled with ingredients while she expertly seasoned their meals. Other nights, they'd sit on his balcony, drinking wine and talking about life. He always had this faraway look sometimes, as if his mind drifted elsewhere, but whenever she asked, he'd just smile and pull her close. "You always look like you're carrying a secret," she said one evening, lying on his bed, watching him undress after a long day. Maxwell smirked, tossing his shirt onto a chair. "Do I?" "Yes." She propped herself up on one elbow, studying him. "You have this air of mystery, like there's a part of you I can't reach." He sat on the edge of the bed, his fingers tracing the inside of her palm. "And does that bother you?" Amanda thought about it. She had never met a man like him, calm, intense, yet distant in a way she couldn't quite put into words. But he had never given her a reason to doubt him. "No," she admitted. "But sometimes I wonder what goes on in that head of yours." Maxwell lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a soft kiss against her knuckles. "I think about you," he said simply. The words sent warmth through her chest. He wasn't always expressive, but when he did speak about his feelings, it was with certainty. Their relationship burned fiercely, an all-consuming fire. She had never experienced a love like this before, deep, passionate, yet laced with an undeniable enigma. One night, after another sleepover, Amanda woke up to find him staring out the window. The room was dimly lit by the city lights outside, casting a soft glow on his bare back. "Can't sleep?" she murmured. Maxwell turned, his eyes unreadable. "Just thinking." She padded over to him, slipping her arms around his waist. "About?" His hand came up to rest over hers, his fingers tracing her skin absent-mindedly. "Things I can't talk about yet," he said softly. Amanda tensed slightly, but before she could say anything, he turned and cupped her face, pressing a lingering kiss to her lips. "Trust me," he whispered. She searched his face, seeing something she couldn't quite name in his dark eyes. But she nodded. "I do." And for now, that was enough. 2 years had passed, and Amanda couldn't remember what life felt like before Maxwell. Their relationship had settled into a deep, comfortable rhythm, a kind of love that felt like home. He wasn't just her lover, he was her best friend, her safe place. Everyone around them already saw them as a married couple. She spent more nights at his place than her own. They handled finances together, and he even had a spare key to her catering office. It was only a matter of time before they made it official. But she hadn't expected this. Sitting on the bathroom floor, Amanda stared at the 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test, her heart pounding. She had noticed the changes, fatigue, nausea, and a strange sensitivity to smells, but she kept brushing them aside. Now reality sat before her in clear, undeniable lines. She was pregnant. At first, she felt an overwhelming wave of emotion. Joy, fear, excitement, uncertainty. But then came the guilt. She had promised her mother she would never have a child out of wedlock. It wasn't just about tradition. It was about the values she had grown up with. How would she tell Maxwell? That evening, Maxwell returned home late, exhausted from work. He had been pulling long hours, aiming for a promotion that would allow him more stability in the future. Amanda had made a simple dinner, jollof rice and grilled fish, but she barely touched hers. Maxwell noticed immediately. "What's wrong?" he asked, setting his fork down. She exhaled deeply. "I took a test today." His brows furrowed. "A test?" She bit her lip, then met his gaze. "I'm pregnant." For a moment, he just stared at her, his face unreadable. Then, slowly, a small smile tugged at his lips. "We're having a baby?" His reaction made her throat tighten. "Yes." Maxwell reached for her hand, his grip warm and steady. "Amanda, this is good news." "I know," she whispered. "But you know I promised my mother I wouldn't have a child before marriage." Understanding flickered across his face. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "I wish we had done this sooner." "Me too," she admitted. He leaned forward. Then let's do it now. We'll make it right. But you're always offshore. We'll find a way, he interrupted gently. We can do a low-key traditional ceremony here in Port Harcourt. Just your parents, my friends, and whoever they want to invite. Then we do a court wedding immediately after. Amanda stared at him, surprised by how easily he came up with a solution. Are you sure? Maxwell smiled. I want to marry you, Amanda. Baby or no baby, I've always wanted to. A tear slipped down her cheek, and he wiped it away with his thumb. A few weeks later, Maxwell has visited her parents at their family house in Port Harcourt, and they've agreed to have the wedding the way he suggested. Everything was set. Maxwell gathered a few of his closest friends to stand in for his absent family. The ceremony was small but beautiful. Amanda wore a rich wine-colored George wrapper with intricate gold embroidery, her hair styled in an elegant updo. Maxwell, in a matching outfit, looked more handsome than ever. There was laughter, blessings, and a deep sense of warmth. Even without a grand event, it felt right. The court wedding was simple, just signatures and official vows. But the moment Maxwell slid the ring onto her finger, Amanda felt an overwhelming peace. She was now Amanda Maxwell Nwosu. With the wedding behind them, they settled into married life, preparing for the arrival of their baby. Maxwell became even more attentive, rubbing her feet after long days, waking up early to make her breakfast, and talking to her belly every night as if the baby could hear him. You're getting more beautiful every day, he whispered one evening, resting his hand on her growing bump. She rolled her eyes playfully. You have to say that. You're my husband. I don't have to say anything, he teased, leaning in to kiss her. I want to. Their love had taken many turns. Unexpected meetings, deep conversations, and now, marriage and a baby on the way. But through it all, one thing remained constant. Maxwell was hers, and she was his. The cries of a newborn filled their home for the first time, and Amanda's heart swelled with emotions she couldn't put into words. Maxwell held their baby girl, his strong hands cradling her as though she was the most delicate thing in the world. She's perfect, Amanda whispered, exhausted yet overwhelmed with joy. Maxwell kissed her forehead, his eyes filled with something deeper than happiness, something intense, almost knowing. She's everything, he murmured. Their little family flourished. Late-night feedings turned into giggles echoing through the house, and Amanda found herself falling even more in love with her husband as she watched him step into fatherhood effortlessly. He was patient, present, and fiercely protective of both her and the baby. Yet, there was something about him, something unseen, yet deeply felt. The first time she truly noticed it, she brushed it off as coincidence. One evening, she had been cooking in the kitchen when her phone rang. She stepped away to take the call, leaving a boiling pot on the stove. Before she could return, Maxwell appeared in the doorway, a towel in his hand. Turn off the burner, he said calmly. Amanda frowned. What? You forgot the stove on, he said, walking past her to switch it off himself. The water was about to spill over. She blinked. But how did you know? Maxwell chuckled, ruffling her hair playfully. You're predictable, my love. You always get distracted when you're on the phone. That explanation made sense. But something about the way he had appeared right at the moment the water would have spilled unsettled her. Then there was the night she had gone out with a friend and forgot to check the time. It was late, too late. She was just about to call Maxwell to tell him she was on her way home when her phone buzzed. Come outside. I'm here. Her breath caught. How did he know where I was? She hadn't even told him. She stepped outside the restaurant, and there he was, leaning against his car, arms crossed. You. How did you? I just had a feeling, he said smoothly, opening the car door for her. Let's go home. She didn't push further, but the thought stayed with her. Over time, Amanda sometimes wondered about Maxwell's roots. He never talked much about his village, and though she had met some of his friends, he had no family members in Port Harcourt. She occasionally thought about visiting his people, but somehow, the thought never stayed long enough for her to act on it. Maxwell's work kept him busy, and between raising their child and managing her catering business, she barely had time to travel. Someday, I'd like to visit your village, she mentioned once as they lay in bed. Maxwell's body tensed slightly. Just for a second. If she wasn't paying attention, she wouldn't have noticed. You will, he said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. But let's not worry about that now. We have too much going on. And just like that, the thought faded. Years passed, and their love grew even deeper. They had 2 more children, 2 boys who were as sharp and observant as their father. Their house was always filled with laughter, playful chaos, and the warmth of a family that truly belonged together. Maxwell was a loving husband and an even better father. He knew exactly when Amanda was overwhelmed, stepping in without being asked. He seemed to anticipate his children's needs before they voiced them. Amanda told herself it was just a sign of a deeply intuitive man. But deep inside, she knew there was more to it. She just didn't know what. And for now, she chose not to ask. Amanda had never been the type of woman to ignore the obvious. It had been 5 years of marriage, 3 beautiful children, and countless memories with Maxwell. He was her rock, her love, the man who had given her the best years of her life. But one thing had always remained unsettled in her heart: his home. She had never set foot in his village, never met his family, and the only connection she had to his roots were the stories he told her about his mother. Stories of a kind, strong woman who raised him with love despite their struggles. It no longer made sense to be married for this long without meeting the woman who gave birth to her husband. So, in early October, she started reminding Maxwell that they needed to travel to his hometown in Enugu for the Christmas holidays. At first, she expected some hesitation. Maxwell was always busy with work, and somehow, something always came up whenever she brought up the idea before. But this time, he agreed without question. "No excuses this time," she said, smiling as she leaned against his chest one night. "No excuses," he repeated, kissing her forehead. "We'll go." They began making plans. Maxwell told her about the uncompleted building he had started in the village, how he intended to finish it once they got there. He sent money ahead for renovations, and even bought gifts for his mother. Amanda felt at peace. Finally, she would see where her husband came from. December arrived with its usual festive energy. The children were excited about traveling, and Amanda had packed everything they would need. But just a few days before their trip, Maxwell sat her down one evening, his expression unreadable. "There's an emergency at work," he said, rubbing his forehead. "Something urgent came up, and I have to handle it." Amanda's heart sank. "But Maxwell—" "I know," he interrupted gently, taking her hands in his. "I know how much this trip means to you. That's why you'll still go, just like we planned." She frowned. "Without you, I'll join you as soon as I can." His voice was calm, reassuring. "I don't want to ruin this for you. You need to meet my mother, and the kids should see where I come from." He handed her a neatly written paper with detailed directions to his village and his father's compound. Then he transferred a huge amount of money into her account. "That's to complete the building," he said. "Make it beautiful for us. And these," he pointed to the carefully wrapped gifts in the corner, "are for my mother." Despite her disappointment, Amanda couldn't find a reason to argue. Maxwell had thought of everything. So she sighed and nodded. "All right, I'll go. But don't take too long." "I won't," he promised, holding her tightly. "I love you, Amanda." And for some reason, there was something final about the way he said it. The road trip was smooth, and the children were excited about meeting their grandmother for the first time. When they finally arrived at the village, the directions Maxwell gave her led them straight to his father's compound. The moment they arrived, everything changed. The compound they were led to was a poor, weathered place, the kind of home abandoned by hope. An old woman sat outside, her frail frame draped in a worn wrapper, eyes clouded with sorrow. But when she saw Amanda and the children, something flickered in her expression, a faint light of forgotten joy. "Who are you, my daughter?" the woman asked. "Mama, I'm your son's wife," Amanda answered, her voice uncertain. "Maxwell sent us." The old woman's laughter was soft but hollow. "My daughter, that is not possible. My Maxwell never married. He died years ago." There was a moment of silence. Then the world began to crack. Amanda's hands trembled as she turned to look at her children with the man she had loved for years. "No, Mama, you must be mistaken. My husband is Maxwell. He is a marine engineer. He works offshore." The old woman's face crumpled and tears welled up in her eyes. She pointed to a lonely grave at the back of the compound. "That is my son. He never left this village. He died before he could finish building his house. My daughter, who have you been married to?" Everything became a blur. The ground beneath Amanda's feet felt unsteady. The children clung to her, their innocent eyes filled with confusion and fear. Her husband was dead. The man she had loved, lived with, bore children for, had never existed. Shaken and broken, Amanda returned to Port Harcourt. She stepped into their home, the home she shared with a man who had deceived her, yet loved her more deeply than she had ever known. Her hands trembled as she reached for a piece of paper lying on the center table. It was a letter. My love, by now you know the truth. I never meant to deceive you, but I never had a choice. My mother was alone, broken, and fading. When God gave me another chance at life, I knew it was for a purpose, to give her a family, to finish what I couldn't in my first life. Then I met you, and I fell in love. You were my heartbeat, my anchor in a world I didn't belong to. I fought to stay, but the truth was always chasing me. Now you must live on. Take care of Mama for me. She is your mother now. Forgive me. Maxwell. The letter fell from her hands. Tears came, but so did acceptance. The love she had shared with him was real. The children they had were real. And now his mother, her mother, was real too. Amanda made a decision. She packed her things and returned to Enugu. The village was more developed than she had imagined, and she realized she had always wanted to escape the chaos of the city. Mama Maxwell became her second mother, and as months passed, the old woman became better. The sorrow in her eyes faded. Her laughter grew fuller, her body stronger. Though the whole thing was a mystery, Amanda held on to the only truth that mattered. She had been loved. Deeply, fiercely, beyond life and death itself. And somehow that was enough. What do you think about this story? Have you heard about something like this happening before? Please share with us in the comment section, and please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel for more good stories. See ya!